Okay, ready to go. We've hit record. Let's play. Hello and welcome to episode 101 of the Testing Peers podcast. Let's hope it's not like a Room 101. This week, I'm joined by two regulars and one shiny new face. So my name's Chris Armstrong and I'm joined here tonight by David Maynard.
Hello.
Simon Pryor.
Hello.
And Rich Bradshaw.
Hello.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about the evolving face of automation. But before we do that, we have a lovely thank you to give to our sponsors. So Saffron QA, they continue to be our sponsor, and they are also here to support the testing community. Therefore, should any of our listeners be in the market for a new job in testing or hiring new talent for your team, please reach out to Ben. He can be reached by email at ben@saffronqa.co.uk, and you can find more details in the show notes. Now, as we like to do a little bit of baptism of fire for our new hosts, we're going to ask Rich to give us some banter. Rich.
Banter. I'm not sure if it's banter, but it depends how you answer it, I guess. Let's see. I'm curious. What was the last item of clothing you bought for yourself? I'm not interested in what you bought someone else. For yourself.
For me, it was a pair of jeans. It was in the sale in January, and it's because I bought some boots, and so therefore I needed longer jeans to fit over the boots. So that's why I bought the jeans.
Matching.
Yeah.
Is it the same time of year you usually buy stuff? January sales? Don't treat yourself rest of the year?
Probably mostly in the sales, yeah. I always look for a bargain. I wouldn't choose anything full price.
I buy all my clothes in January, nothing the rest of the year. Chris?
I went to TK Maxx. Yeah, the random shop. You can't go to TK Maxx knowing what you're going to buy because you never know what you're going to find. But I did want to get a new shirt, so I took my inspiration from the lumberjack sort of fashion of Mark Wintringham and got myself a checked shirt. It was green and black rather than red and black, but I'm sure Mark would forgive me. So I bought that one, and I even have worn it into the office because that's about as smart as I go.
I just realised we should use TK Maxx to explain exploratory testing. Like it's the perfect definition.
It is.
Love it. Yeah, that's a good
idea. And
idea.
for those American listeners in the world, that's TJ Maxx to you.
Or Marshalls or something like that, yeah. Simon?
So I did buy 2 pairs of new jeans and 2 shirts in January, but not in the January sale. I got Next vouchers for my birthday, so I went and did that. Nothing too exciting. I have a very one-shop wardrobe, so most of my wardrobe is Next. So.
I used to be a Burton's man for a long time, and then it disappeared.
Yeah, it disappeared. Didn't it?
Now it's like Amazon, no brand. Ordering
comes
bulk.
from China, 3 sizes too small.
Probably.
What about you, Rich?
Yeah,
I did the annual socks and pants shop. I think that was mine. It's throw out. I don't even bother looking at them. Some people go through that's got holes, that one hasn't. I just lift and shift now. I just go in the bin, the whole drawer. Apart from the conference socks, I've still got the postman socks in the drawer and stuff like that. But yeah, usually turn of the year, Christmas time, do the lift and shift, all brand new socks, pants. It's just easier.
Conferences are great for socks. Oh, I've got some Slack socks on today.
They're expensive though. They are really cool, but they are expensive.
It's true.
But yeah, they are. Socks are good swag. I don't know, when you just put them on, I was putting the postman ones on the other day, you're just like, look at that, postman socks. And then you think, postman. I don't get the same with t-shirts, but with socks, it just, I don't know.
Do you think I need to send Danny Dainton a message now because I'm putting his socks on?
That honestly, that is one of the best things about certain swag, that it makes you, sometimes it's kind of, I like the jacket or I like the hoodie or whatever, but sometimes you go, I remember where I got this. And I'm going to reach out to those people and, have a chat. Or like some of it's just so useful, you use it like every day or every week. But with clothing, yeah, it always triggers me to go, I wonder how they're doing. Or I met that person there, I wonder how they're doing.
That was a nice banter. Thanks, Rich. I didn't feel embarrassed about any of those things. Sometimes you do feel a bit awkward, but that was nice. Thank you. So anyway, automation. It's changed a little bit since we started our careers, didn't it? Do we want to maybe start off? What did automation look like when you first met automation?
So when I first started working for a cybersecurity company, working on the antivirus software, we had this big, what they called the TMS, test management system, that was all Perl-based. And literally it was all the writing Perl scripts that would act as the detection signatures for viruses or fake viruses. And we had this massive, massive system that had 14 different OSs, Solarix, HP, AIX, all the fun Unixes, as well as the Windows stuff. And we just had this literally thousands of Perl scripts. And every test we wrote an automation Perl script for the TMS. And then the testing wasn't finished until the script was live and running in the TMS. So very early on, it was very much automation is just part of the process. But it was, you write it manually first. Once you've written it manually, then write the automation, then it goes live. That was my first thing. It wasn't until I sort of moved companies that I realized there was such things as UI automation and whatever else. So yeah, it was very much Perl and Python based for most of my 12 years in the first company.
Good old Perl. Yeah, mine was a tool called QA Run, very much similar to the UI stuff, but it was for desktops on Windows. I was part of the regression testing team at Lloyd's at the time, so a completely separate team. We had no conversations with any of the other development. We just got given a version on a CD. We gave that CD to Fujitsu. We don't talk about Fujitsu, but we gave the CD to Fujitsu. They installed it on all the test branch machines, like they were the machines that were the actual machines that they had in branches, so they were terrible. They installed the software, and then we went and basically ran these scripts, and it was a load of, is it CRT monitors? Just a big bank of them, and you would just sit there and wait for the script to fall over, and every single one fell over at least 10, 15 times. And yeah, you'd have to go and try and fix it up, but it was like proper all pressing the keys and pressing mouth movements and telling it to move this far. Like, it was really, really tedious, and they were so brittle. And yeah, that tool became QTP. That was kind of grew into QTP, I think, and then someone bought it. But yeah, very much UI based, but really not a pleasant scripting experience at all, and very, very brittle.
So for me, the first time I was doing embedded on some hardware devices, so really it was just command lines. I was just sending command lines and seeing what the effect was really, and hoping that it would do more things that needed to happen. So it was really, really limited. There was an app as well, which I wasn't part of, but they did very limited amount of automation. It wasn't seen as a big thing when I first started out in that particular company. Then we went to another company and we used TestRail and had a bank of scripts, and it depended on the order that you completed them as to whether they would all run or not, or some would break. And then we weren't given time to actually update them. So we knew we had this technical debt, and every stand up I'd go, these have failed. They always fail. We haven't had time to do them or change them. And so it was really quite frustrating.
My start off with automation was baffling little world, because I was working in computer games at the time. The standing picture I've got is I was working on the world-class game Kinect Disneyland Adventures. So imagine a room where all you can see is loads of small monitors with little children running around Disneyland and randomly interacting with characters in Disneyland. And sometimes they're dancing, sometimes they're hugging, sometimes they're going on quests. And it's all just automated button presses that came out of the Xbox dev kit. That was my first integration with automation, and it blew my little mind. It was a bit scary at times, some of the things that happen in computer games when they go wrong. But I did then get to see automation done with coding and scripting eventually. I worked with David previously, and I did see the same sorts of problems with embedded testing systems and things having to run in certain orders. As my initial one just was very UI focused, and the whole concept of stuff being written in code felt to me like that wasn't something I would ever be able to do.
I think the other thing that comes to mind with me at the starting of automation was actually not just the test automation, but I remember writing thousands of lines of bash scripts as well for the build room we had at the time. It's just this room with banks of servers everywhere for all the different OSs, and we'd have to go and build onto a CD and make sure the CD got escrowed and all this kind of stuff. But there was literally thousands of lines of bash scripts and whatever else that was literally doing all the building.
I do remember having a lot of batch files I used to have to run in the morning to get things. And I didn't know what it was. They just go, come in, run this batch file, then run this batch file, run this batch file, then you'll have the latest version. Yeah. Okay.
And I remember there being a big project to, rather than kick them all off manually, to automate the kickoff so that we wouldn't have to do it. Every build, every commit to, what was it at the time? It was Subversion. So SVN was version control. Nice. Every commit we would have to, rather than run it manually, automate it. And that was like the first steps of continuous delivery, et cetera, et cetera. It's very weird.
Yeah. Again, with embedded, we used AT commands. So therefore we create bash scripts and run AT commands, and that was challenging. It's all slow and trying to work it out, and it doesn't give you enough information. And yeah, it's just a nightmare trying to unfathom all these idiosyncrasies that it all threw up.
I kind of want to, just because something triggered my brain sort of laughing slightly. because I'm like that. I wanted just to focus in. You mentioned Subversion. Has anyone got any good version control tales they want to share with anybody? Nightmares or,
I remember a big migration project to migrate from CVS to Subversion, and how everything stopped working when we moved from C, because as bizarre as it sounds, it was so different that everything stopped working. Literally everything had to be changed, and no one had planned for that. They thought they'd just be able to copy scripts from one to another, and it took weeks to solve the problem. And at the same time, we still had some source in MS Source Safe as well, which was a horrible system, completely different to everything else we were doing. And, in that whole time, it was all about, we need these SVN champions that are going to go around everywhere and solve all our problems, and, dedicated one person to it. And he ended up spending the next 6 months working as an SVN champion and ended up quitting.
That'd be a good thing to put on your CV, wouldn't it? SVN champion.
A bit like you and being a Jira champion, really, wouldn't it, Chris?
Hey.
So...
Jira champion. I remember one with I think it was Tortoise. It was a version of SVN, if I remember. Yeah, we had a weird issue that like we all started laughing when someone worked out what it was, but somehow we got locked out of Tortoise, and then someone would unlock it, and then we'd keep getting locked out again. And it turned out it was the automated scripts that were locking it, because one of them had incorrect credentials. So every time they would run to get to the end, it would lock out. And then someone would like, what the hell? It'd all fail. They'd unlock it, and then it would keep happening until someone realized that, one of the scripts, I can't remember which one, was checking out with incorrect credentials, which kept triggering Tortoise's security and would lock us out again. It was like at least several hours before someone tried to work out what it was. That's probably one of the worst. We did have an instance where everything got deleted, but it was backed up quite quickly. But it was only backed up because we had a policy of shifting the version control somewhere else. So the version control itself got completely screwed, but as a company, they backed it up somewhere else, and we were able to bring that one back.
I worked in a place where we had a chap that was literally the gatekeeper of the versioning.
That sounds familiar.
He had a physical machine with Visual Source Safe on it, and we had to submit to him any code changes. He would review them and choose to update or not. He would then compile the code and then send us out the .exe. And it got to the point where he wasn't in our team, by the way. So he wasn't under our manager or any of these things. I don't know how it happened. And in the end, what happened was one of my colleagues actually happened to be going to their office, because we were in different countries. This guy was in Switzerland. And one of my colleagues went to the Swiss office, waited till this guy went on lunch, took in an external hard drive, took a copy of Visual Source Safe and uploaded it into TFS. So we could then actually use version control ourselves.
We had a similar gatekeeper role that would send us a screenshot of the diff between the versions to check that we'd actually
screenshots are really helpful.
Were these the changes that you made? It's just absolutely random. It's amazing what kind of roles there were back in those early days of automation.
But I think what you were saying a minute ago, earlier, Simon, with the talk about the evolution, I think we've kind of have gone a bit full circle in that we used to build lots of little scripts and little hacky bash things that did little things for us. And then we all came, not saying all of us, but the industry came a bit fixated on this UI testing, end-to-end testing. Tools started coming out left, right, and center. And then suddenly our focus was all about automating tests, as opposed to some of these little scripty, hacky things that were meant to just help us be a bit quicker or a bit more efficient.
Exactly.
We kind of went down this tunnel vision as an industry. We're now starting to see a lot more automation efforts back on this little bit, like, actually, you're really smart. How can I make your life a little bit easier? Like, what can I do with all this amazing programming and coding skills that I've developed over, all this time of doing automated tests or little bash scripts to make your life a little bit easier?
I think you're right. And I think it's also caused, I won't say it's completely negative, but there has been a lot of negative impact and negative connotations of the UI testing automation versus everything else. And, I think that there is almost a loss of skill. Almost it feels like that everything's been pushed onto, let's just do everything in the UI. Whereas, like you say, the time we spent writing scripts to make things faster, and someone they'd write a tool to generate a diff before there was things like Beyond Compare and stuff like that. And it's just that we were doing a lot of stuff to make our lives easy. And now it all seems to be about, let's just get those thousands of regression tests automated through the UI. But like you say, hopefully there's a lot more tools coming out now that will be a bit smarter than that.
I think it was problems. We used to focus on problems we had instead of chasing this unicorn of having everything, fully automated and all that side of it. I think another challenge in the same space was not to get into a terminology fight, but the distinction between UI testing and like end-to-end testing. We kind of started treating them as the same thing as opposed to doing, slightly smarter automation on the UI. But yeah, on that topic, I think that now there is a plethora of tools. Like we can do all sorts of different types of automated tests now compared to just doing the UI or end-to-end.
I think with that now, I think there has been a move away from using things like Python or coding languages to write stuff. It's now all about buying the tool off the shelf and making it easy for the testing or easy for the users to, low code, no code automation rather than, actually writing scripts. And I'm not sure whether that's good or bad. I don't think I've spent enough time investigating it really, but it just feels like it's in an attempt to make things easier, they're taking some of the skills and the knowledge away.
Is it also sort of motives and stuff? I'm going to ask a couple of questions and maybe something will trigger in you. You'll interrupt me. But I was thinking like Rich mentioned sort of what problem we're trying to solve. And sometimes we're not necessarily looking to solve a testing problem. Sometimes it is a process problem or it's a skill gap problem. You kind of, in a lot of these conversations, in a lot of job descriptions, we see things about coding skills and we don't talk about testing skills. And why are we even doing this? And why are we doing it here? And who does those things? These are all conversations that you often get asked, but not in job interviews, not when you're speaking to tool vendors, maybe not even when you're speaking to stakeholders. They're just looking for key things. And I was just wondering, do you think that the motives of automation, whether that's how it's sold or how people interpret what it is, do you reckon that's changed since you were first introduced to it?
I think I would say it has. I think I feel like there's a world out there now where if you automate something, you can just reduce cost or you can make things faster. It's not looking at the quality of systems, the quality of the testing you're doing. Whereas I felt like we had more control over the quality when we were writing scripts ourselves and doing things to make the testing better. Whereas I do think now the focus seems to have almost, maybe it's the world I'm in, but the focus feels like it's just about automating so we can reduce the manual efforts and the costs elsewhere. And that, for me, feels like that's the wrong narrative. Automation should be about making our testing better and the quality of the systems better, not just about making it cheaper. Because the tools cost themselves, right? So you're spending money on a tool to replace the efforts of however many people that are doing it manually.
I think there's a lot of facets to the context or characteristics that I think are important, but I've been involved in conversations and teams that automate because we can. And I think that was the thing that changed. Earlier on, everything was done, quote, manually. You can't see me doing quotes above my head, but like everything was done manually, and therefore we had this suite of test cases, right, that we had to work our way through, and automating them felt like it was part of the, solving the problem. Whereas now we kind of like automate first. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's a good thing, but we don't talk enough about the skills that allow you to automate first, which is talking about those risks and those tests in pre-planning, having team-wide conversations about what we should and shouldn't automate, listing out what should be automated as part of the deliverable, listing charters in the same ticket. So all that work that we used to talk about, people think it's gone, and it's not gone. It's just moved. It's morphed into other phases of the software development lifecycle. But it's still taking place, but we don't put enough emphasis on it. We think some people think that bit's really easy, and then we end up with tests for the sake of tests. And they're not testing anything that's useful or matters, and people don't do enough, in my opinion, of that, really understanding the risk, mitigating it on the right layer, and then also listing out what else we need to do that isn't worth automating. We know it's a risk, but actually that's not worth scripting that. Let's do an hour of exploratory testing after we've done the automation and that's working. I think there's still a lot of this thing that like work that goes on. I remember interviewing someone and they were brilliant at programming, miles better than me. Like they were absolutely brilliant at writing what they were doing. But when I started talking to them about risks, like it glazed over. And I was like, well, you will be great on my team if I can spoon feed you all the risks that you should mitigate. But we don't work that way. So I need you to also be able to do the risk. And I think even if you look at a lot of the education that's out there, it is all about learning the tools. And again, the tools are great if someone else is spoon feeding you. Yeah. But if we take our eye off that other bit, then we're not going to, in my opinion, you'll get a lot of automated tests and they'll be green and stuff and whatever, but they're not really going to help you solve that testing problem.
We find exactly the same thing. We can get some very good people who can write scripts and write architecture or whatever, but the key skill, especially for us as a consultancy, is thinking outside the box, thinking, you're put in a strange situation. What are the risks? What are the details that you need to think about when you're designing these tests? And if you haven't got those skills, then unfortunately, however good you are at your automation, we can't use you because you've got to work independently and you have to think of those risks in that particular context.
Yeah, I mean, I remember an interview once where I had this really, really, again, really good coder. But when I started asking the questions about tests, how do you identify a test you're going to write? Oh, well, someone hands that to me and I'll just write the scripts. Sorry, so if I got you to identify the test yourselves, oh, no, I don't do that. That's not part of my role. Well, it would be part of your role here. Well, I'm not here for that role. I want a role where I develop the tests. Well, we need you to. Just ended up in an argument. And I was like, I'm sorry, this role is not right for you. If you're not prepared to look at the testing part, because it was an SDET role, we need you to think about the testing, not just about the automating. And he said that was never his intention. He always just wanted to come and do automation. Well, I'm sorry,
you didn't open up Del Dua's blog about the testing teching synergy and start talking him through everything.
He could talk through a pyramid, to be fair to him, but yeah, he had no idea how to write tests.
It's a triangle, Simon.
I know.
Damn it.
I know. That's why I said it.
So going back to Richard's point about exploratory testing, how important is it within automation to recognize exploratory testing? Because people, from my experience, is that they think automation, that's all I need to do, just write scripts, write the framework, whatever, and they don't think about those key corner cases that they can't automate or perhaps shouldn't automate. What's your thoughts about that?
I think the two sets of skills go really hand in hand. Like the very, very good automators that I know are brilliant at exploratory testing, because when you sit down to automate something, you have to explore it. And it's interesting that you're exploring it from a different angle. I've said a few times in talks that a lot of people claim that they find bugs, from automation, but a lot of the bugs people find are whilst automating it. And it's because you're looking at it from this different lens. You're not looking at it anymore as a user. You're starting to look in between the layers. And when we get some really good exploratory testers with strong, I always make a distinction between being technical and coding. When they have strong technical skills, people start to model the system differently. And then you start to do that exploration. And I think that comes from that technical knowledge. But also, yeah, when you start exploring an app in order to automate it, things just look different. I don't know what it is, but you just start to spot things differently, and you're viewing it more from how's a robot going to use this, like as opposed to how's a user who's got a brain and can adapt a little bit and, can go, oh, okay, refresh that. It's not the same when you come to do it from a robot. But yeah, I think the two have to go hand in hand from creating it, but also when they fail, we want them to fail. That's the whole point why we write them. They've failed, they've detected some change. And I've said it in some of my training, that's an invitation to explore. It's literally a little robot shouting at you, come look over here. There's something not the same anymore. Come and have a look. And then if you go and look, you need to have that exploration skills. You can't just say, I write the scripts, I'm not going to look into the failure. You have to do that as well. And I think we get a lot of talk in the community and the industry about, labels for things, but it is testing. You're just a computer or a little robot has done a little bit of work for you and told you to come and look over here. And when you go look, you need that exploratory skills we call it exploratory testing, but those critical thinking skills, that what if, I wonder what else has happened. You need that. If you just go in and blindly fix the script, you've lost a huge opportunity to discover something interesting.
They're not mutually exclusive, are they? Exploratory and automation. That's the thing. Not. I mean,
some people view them as that. And I think some tool vendors pitch it like that.
Some people treat exploratory and manual as a synonym. They're interchangeable with these things. I've seen though, Marat Pahiavi does the exploratory testing automation in Robot Framework, doesn't she? Automating, you're exploring and automating hand in hand, which is to your point, I think, before, Rich, where as you're writing code, you are testing and checking things as you go through.
You're usually also doing a lot of checking from, is this worth automating? Is this the right behavior? Has someone given me the right scenario? What would a good oracle look like? What's a good assertion? Like, there's so much thinking that needs to happen. And again, when you were saying about some people being good programmers, I think in some cases they're not aware they're doing it. So they've not honed those skills to improve them. And therefore they don't even talk about it when it comes to the interviews. They talk about, just the things that they've automated. I remember fixing my CV a long time ago now, saying to change it from being I automated 100 tests, right? I used to write stuff like that to I automated 100 critical test that we identified by doing A, B, and C that saved us this many hours of release and gave us confidence in this part of the system. It's a completely different narrative and value add to I just automated some scripts.
I do have a question, Rich. This is just for the benefit of people sometimes who maybe hear the word Oracle and only think of a company. Just for the benefit, I'm asking the stupid question in the room for the benefit of anybody who maybe doesn't know what an Oracle is in terms of programming. What do you mean?
In the definition term, it's a fallible way of identifying a problem. It's basically, we have a lot of them in our lives. The example I always joke about is pineapple on a pizza. So oracles are also mostly personable or fit for a context. If you put that in front of me, I would reject the pizza. Whereas some people would be like, oh my God, that's my favorite pizza. I'm going to, smash this whole pizza and eat the whole thing, right? So I think it's a way of identifying there's a problem. Another one I came across was, I don't anymore, I used to go to the gym, but like the swimming pool, the door to the swimming pool at the gym, the handle was 3/4 up the door. And I didn't understand. I was like, what? It makes no sense to me. Why is the door handle so high? It's so kids couldn't open the door and fall in the pool. So now I have an oracle whenever I see a door to a swimming pool. I'm like, your handle should be 3/4 up the door. So we all have these oracles and way of identifying what's good or bad or right or wrong. And in testing and automation space, the distinction we make is between explicit and tacit. So some of them are in our heads. Some of them we can't really explain very well. We've not been able to. Some of them are codified and given to us. A business analyst or a product owner says this is how it should work. Or there's an automated test in place written by somebody else that says this is how it should work. So a lot of the time they're handed to us and we call that codified. I call that codified. Sometimes they're tacit and just floating in our heads, and we can develop them really quickly, which is why, in agile development, we encourage a lot of conversations, right? It's to share that knowledge, to share these oracles. So you can call them assertions. They're kind of the same, but they're more codified. Some of the other types of oracles are more heuristic based, which may work, may not. They might help you, they might not. Like things like comparative heuristics. So you might use a website, for looking for a flight, and then you might use another website for looking for a flight, and then you might compare and contrast those two to see if there's any missing gaps, and that's you're using one as an oracle against the other. So yeah, that's a long-winded example of oracles.
Glad I asked the question. Thank you.
What's the way forward? Because I feel like we're in a place now where the market is full of tools, full of vendor-driven, tools that are sold. I must bin 50 emails a day from tool vendors saying that their tool can solve all of our automation problems when they have no idea about our estate. What's the right way forward? Because it feels to me, like I say, that there's so much choice out there now that it's difficult to know which tools are good, which tools aren't, what's going to solve your problem, what isn't, what's going to cost a bomb, what isn't. It's a real challenge.
Do you think the first thing to do isn't to be looking at tools at all, right? It's about
solving the problem,
understanding
right?
your context, understanding
what the problem is you're trying to solve,
what the problem is, but also like what have you got? What skill base have you got? What's already in your estate, and what problem areas? What are you trying to test in various different things? And is that the right thing? All of these things you should be doing before you start talking to tool vendors. The problem
100%.
is when a tool vendor starts to dictate things to you, and sometimes you want advice. I get it. But I think understanding your own context surely first is the most important thing to do. But that isn't really advice beyond try and understand where the hell you're at before you start speaking to vendors.
It's that context word again, isn't it?
I think there's a few things that need to happen. So hopefully we're going these summer directions. I think the first thing is we're on this podcast and we're all quite active in trying to learn and stay ahead of the curve. And I think it's important to understand that the context in the wild is vastly different. We know that some tool vendors might be selling you snake oil and trying to push you down a certain way. Not everyone does. So, they hear a brilliant pitch, they hear a figure of money, they're in, right? We know that there's some companies still with mainly a predominantly manual approach to software, still waterfall. And then there's some of us at the other end of the scale, let's say, on projects where we automate on every single layer that's possible. We've got brilliant unit tests. We've got brilliant integration tests, hundreds of thousands of API tests. We've got UI tests that all use mocks and fakes and stubs. We've got visual testing. Everything's atomic. We've got amazing data creation. We've got all these things in place. So acknowledging that that's the case, I hope that we get better at identifying that context and understand that it's I call it problems before tools. So what is the context? What is the problem? And then once we identify that problem, is automation actually going to help, or is it going to cause more of a problem to identify? So I think we need to get better at first knowing that we need automation. That's the starting point. And then once we've got it, we need to get better at understanding that there's a lot of options now. Again, another aspect of it I feel is you get a lot of people that are very tool focused, as in like, I'm playwright now. It's the only thing I know. Like I'm Mr. Selenium. I only use Cypress. And I think a lot of people miss that they've learned the art or the skill of automating a UI. You just happen to apply it in tool A. But if you took a step back and you appreciate you now know how to structure tests, you understand some ways of architecting UI tests, you understand locators and weighting and all sorts of things. The tool is trivial in a way. And I hope we see more of people realizing that, being more tool agnostic, realizing that, it plays a wider part in the testing approach. Automating on the right layer. I think we need to see more awareness of what risk are you trying to mitigate, and realizing that it can be done most of the time on a lot lower down the stack. And it doesn't have to be you that automates it. If you're the automator and you can't do that type of test, take pride in the fact that your team's going to automate the right thing at the right layer, and then maybe learn how to do that. So I hope we start to see more targeted tests, as I would call them. And then I think another final thing I would love to see is go back full circle to what we said at the start. More little scripts that just help us get by. Most people at the very right of the industry, we've got all this amazing code that can spin up data and environments really quickly, but it's exclusive to your automated tests. Stick a wrapper on it or a UI on it or an API or something and give it to everyone else. Give it to the product owners to create data. Give it to the manual/exploratory testers if you have them. You've already done the hard work. Try and find ways to repurpose it to help with the other types of testing that you are doing. Even if you don't think you are doing them. And start to think of, actually, I've got great coding tool knowledge. I'm going to shadow David for an hour and see if I can help him. Why do you keep doing that? Did you know of this tool? No, I didn't know about that tool. Here you go. Use this tool. Suddenly we've saved David 20 minutes a day, right? Very few automated tests can give that kind of reward. Like, it's going to take a long time for them to give you that kind of payback, and people like to talk about money. So yeah, I think we want to see us more targeted, being more layer and type of test aware as opposed to tools. And then also back to this, identifying what problems your teams are facing, what testability issues have you got, and using a lot of this programming knowledge and coding knowledge that a lot of SDETS testers have built up, and applying it to help testing carry on moving forward.
Awesome. Well, I think that's probably a fitting way to finish the conversation. So thank you, Richard, for joining us. Really enjoyed having you with us tonight. Thank you, Chris, David, for your contributions. Thank you to Saffron QA for continuing to sponsor us. If you want to get in touch, then reach out to contact us at testingpeers.com or at testingpeers on the socials. And don't forget, March the 14th, we are in Nottingham for the first ever Testing Peers conference. Tickets are still available at only £20, and our conference program has now been announced. So please check our website to find out more, testingpeerscon.com. With that, I'll bid you farewell, and we'll speak to you again soon. For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.